What would you do if you found out you only have 1 month to live? Would you be angry? Would you tell anyone? Now, what if you also found out you had superpowers? What would you do then? Would you try to right some wrongs? Would you go out and save the universe? Well, there was a comic book that set out to tell this story. It's one of my favorite comics of all time. It explores not only what it means to be a superhero, but what it means to be a human. This is the story of 1 month to live. Hello and welcome to the Chemist's Codex. My name is Peter and I like to tell the stories of whatever happens to catch my interest, because I believe those stories can teach us more about ourselves. 1 Month to Live was published back in 2010 as part of Marvel's Heroic Age line. This was the era immediately after the Dark Reign era had ended. It was branded as a return to form after a period of darkness where it seemed like the villains had actually won. The story is told over 5 issues that were published over the course of 1 month. I find it a deeply moving story and one that I want more people to know about. The story follows Dennis Sykes, a man who lives in Queens with his wife Abby and works at the bank. However, due to the recent deaths of his sister and brother-in-law, Dennis has had to take in his niece, Kelly, who is struggling with the loss. On top of all that, Dennis has to go and form a children's hospital that the loan for their planned sculpture garden, where the kids get to design the sculptures, has been rescinded. Dennis isn't happy. He hates his job, he's struggling to deal with the sudden responsibility of raising a child who just lost her parents, while also dealing with the loss himself. But as Dennis is leaving the hospital, he notices the driver of a medical waste truck getting mugged by some guys looking to get some drugs. Dennis steps in to save the driver, but the criminals turn on Dennis, grabbing the hazardous waste from the truck and forcing it down his throat. And right before Dennis would be shot, the Thing of the Fantastic Four shows up to save him. Dennis passes out and wakes up in the Baxter building, where Mr. Fantastic informs him that he has cancer that has been exacerbated by the medical waste, and he has about 1 month before it kills him. However, after Dennis quits his job and returns home, he discovers he has superpowers. He can manipulate matter, changing it and shaping it as he desires. So what does Dennis do? He goes and robs the bank, intending to give the money to the children's hospital for their sculpture garden. However, he gets caught by his niece Kelly and realizes he shouldn't have taken the money. But as he's returning the money, Dennis is caught by Spider-Man. Dennis convinces Spidey to let him go, and then uses his powers to create the hospital sculpture garden himself. After this, Dennis is feeling better about himself. He still knows he doesn't have much time left, but he's determined to make the most of it. He protects his neighborhood from Mr. Negative's influence, and even helps the Fantastic Four save the galaxy from Ego the Living Planet, although using his powers exacerbates the cancer spreading through his body. But there might be a way to cure him. In the Savage Land, the remote tropical environment within Antarctica, there is a flower known as the Resurrection Lily, which allegedly has remarkable curative powers. The only thing is that the flower blooms once every 10 years for a single day. Fortunately, there's one blooming right then, so they set out to the Savage Land to find the flower. Unfortunately, a pharmaceutical company has a strike team in the Savage Land also wanting to recover the flower. A fight breaks out, and in the chaos, Kelly is hit with a stray bullet. After the strike team is quickly defeated, Dennis uses the power of the Resurrection Lily to save his niece, sacrificing his only hope of surviving the cancer. Dennis spends the last few days of his life with his family. Then, after defending his neighborhood from Hammerhead, who is working under orders from Mr. Negative, and being accepted into the Avengers, Dennis passes away in his wife's arms. Dennis leaves behind a legacy of spending your life to its fullest and working for what matters to you, whether that be your family, your community, or simply a job well done. He was given 1 month to live and didn't waste a single minute. It's a beautiful story told over the course of 5 chapters. And you know what else famously has 5 things? The 5 stages of grief. I know it's a really impressive connection I made there, but even though it's not the most surprising connection to make, it is worth talking about. So starting off with stage 1, there's denial. After discovering his new powers, Dennis outright denies that he has cancer. His inner monologue while he's robbing the bank states as much. Crazy powers came out of nowhere. Richards gave them to me. Must have. Only possibility. In the medicine he gave me. Mr. Fantastic. Of course he has a cure for cancer. Dennis was told he is going to die within a few weeks, and then discovers he has superpowers. And while trying to process all of this new information, of course Dennis would try to deny his fate. And it also explains why he decides to rob the bank. Sure, he was planning on giving the money to a children's hospital, but if he's denying the fact he has cancer, why can't he deny the law too? It's only after Dennis is confronted by his family and he starts processing what's happening to him that he realizes his mistake. Dennis returns the money and decides to use his new powers for good. Of course, when Dennis calls up Mr. Fantastic to thank him for the powers, and Reed says he didn't give Dennis any powers and confirms that Dennis does in fact have cancer, we move into the second stage, anger. Dennis turns away from his family, unsure of how to tell them he's dying, and instead meets up with Spider-Man for some superhero training. But Dennis gets increasingly frustrated with Spidey's advice. It's all stuff for the long term, stuff you would think about if you had more than a few weeks to do it. And when Dennis returns home, he finds it on fire, his family trapped inside, and mobsters standing outside. Dennis releases his anger, summoning several giant earthen fists to take them out, thinking back to a time when his own father got angry with him, and then changes the oxygen in the air so the fire cannot burn. And after finally telling his family about the cancer that will kill him, we move into bargaining. See, when Dennis helped the Fantastic Four save the galaxy from Ego the Living Planet, he did so by extracting a cancerous parasite from the cosmic being. Mr. Fantastic coaches Dennis through this, saying, dig past the surface of Ego, to the core of him. Feel his pain, locate the source of it, the biomineral entity deep inside his living mantle. Grasp hold of that entity, reshape it, pull it toward you, and cast it out. Dennis feels good about himself afterwards. If he can save the galaxy, then maybe everything will work out. And if he can use his powers to remove a cancer from something as big and powerful as Ego the Living Planet, then maybe he can use his powers to remove his own cancer. But Dennis doesn't have the strength to do that. He can save the galaxy, but he can't save himself. Which brings us to stage 4, depression. When told he has to go to the Savage Land to find the Resurrection Lily, Dennis responds pessimistically. He doesn't fully believe that the flower will be able to heal him, and he tells everyone to just let him die in peace. I think it's when Kelly gets shot and Dennis uses the lily to save her life that he moves on from this mindset. Because Kelly outright states that if Dennis dies, it's now her fault because Dennis had to use his only chance of living to save her instead. But Dennis tells her that it's not her fault, that all he's ever wanted is to live a life that matters, and maybe saving the galaxy doesn't matter, but saving her does. And Dennis tells his niece that he wouldn't change anything that's happened. So Dennis finally moves on to the final stage, acceptance. I think one single panel shows his acceptance incredibly well. It's Dennis tearing up his bucket list. He knows there's not enough time to do those things, and he's okay with it. Because what's more important to him, what matters to him, is strengthening his relationship with Kelly and his community. Among some of his final moments, Dennis takes Kelly out to get some ice cream. And during this outing, he tries to impart on her some important life lessons he wishes he had learned sooner. And these lessons are what this entire story is really about, and something I think more people could stand to learn. The first lesson is rather simple. It's important to have a community to support you. Knowing the people around you, supporting them, and letting them support you will help make the harder times easier. The second lesson is arguably more important. Dennis tells Kelly about his father, her grandfather, and how he worked at a nearby steel mill, how there were several other workers who were being promoted above him over and over, but Dennis's father did the job and did it well. The point of the story is to illustrate how we all need to choose what it is we want out of our work, and really what we decide matters in our life. We can either be out to do our job well, or we can be out to be acknowledged by other people. Sure, it's possible to get both, but you still have to choose which one matters to you. A job well done might not get you acknowledged by other people, but you'll be satisfied with the work. And if you're content with the work you do, then the rest should follow. And that is what the story of 1 Month to Live is really all about. We all need to decide what matters to us. For Dennis, what matters to him is using his powers to protect his community and using the time he has left to be with his family. In his final moments, Dennis stands in defense of his neighborhood against Hammerhead. He stands up against the intimidation tactics of Mr. Negative. With one final push, he protects his family, stalling long enough for the Avengers to arrive and take down Hammerhead. He is offered a spot on the team, which he accepts, and is applauded by his neighbors as a hero. But Dennis didn't do anything over this last month of his so he would be applauded and cheered. He did what he did because he decided it mattered to him. Sure, he saved the galaxy with the Fantastic Four, but that wasn't what made him a hero. Dennis's true heroism comes from the lessons he leaves behind, lessons of community and work worth doing. He used his powers to build the sculpture garden for the children's hospital, because it provided comfort to the children and brought his community together. After defending his neighborhood and being accepted into the Avengers, Dennis returns home and collapses. He reassures his wife that it's okay, that he's with his family, that they were what made it all matter. And with a smile, Dennis closes his eyes and is gone. The final pages of 1 Month to Live take place 1 month later. Abby and Kelly are doing their best now that Dennis is gone, and we see Kelly has taken Dennis's lessons to heart, as she is volunteering at the Children's Hospital, where a statue of Dennis has been erected in honor of his life. Over these final panels is a quote from the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw, and I think it's also a great quote to end this video on. "This is the true joy of life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature, instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Thanks for watching. I will always remember the first time I read this comic book. It was through Marvel Unlimited, and I was up late reading comics. I started reading 1 Month to Live at around 2:30 in the morning, and by 3:30 I was openly crying. I actually had to put the book down to just take a minute and cry. 1 Month to Live is easily one of my favorite comics, and I highly recommend it. And now I want to hear from you. Have any of you read it before, or maybe you have your own takeaway from the story? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of lesser known comic books, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my next video.